From the crossroads of the Ozarks, it is P.I.D. Radio. Welcome. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert, and once again, we're going to take you through the news of the day and imagine where we'll be in the future, which is where we all want to be.
Because that's where we'll spend the rest of our lives. Yes. Welcome. Well, right off the bat, please take advantage of our free app. Get that app because it gets you all of our content, and it is free.
It is free.
Did we mention it's free?
Nothing at all. We're just giving it away. Yeah, I know. It's free to those who download it.
Yes.
But it is supported by the donations of many wonderful people.
That is true.
Who are kind enough to share, frankly, in this economy, hard-won dollars.
And we are truly thankful for your support.
We really are.
Yeah, there is a monthly cost to the for the app, but it is worth it to us to make the content available to you at no charge. So if your support comes in the form of just sharing things that we post online, that's great. Your prayers, of course, much appreciated.
So appreciated.
But you'll find it at gilberthouse.org/app. It's available for mobile devices, also Roku and Apple TV, which gets you the video content on your big screen. But if you're just listening, you can do that there on the TV as well. You can also bring it into your smartphone or tablet, and the app includes an audio Bible app. You can read along, you can listen to your audio Bible, and also has a calendar of upcoming events, which I'm going to have to start filling in for the years. We're starting to accept invitations to speak.
One of them is we're going to go down to Blue Eye on February 2nd. So if you live in the area, southwest Missouri or northern Arkansas, or you just plan on visiting Branson at some point during this cold weather, join us on Groundhog Day. We'll be down at Morningside recording some shows with Jim and Lori Baker.
Yes, and we'll be talking about something I think we're going to be talking about here today quite a bit, which is the Great Reset, which is the initiative being promoted by the World Economic Forum, which is meeting this coming week. Their 2023 meeting in Davos, or Davos if you're a
Doctor Who fan.
Yeah, Davos, Switzerland, begins on Monday, and that's where the elites meet to determine how the rest of us will have to live.
The funny thing about the Davos meeting is it's been in the news for the last several years, and I'd say for the last 10 years. And it is exploding within the world of those who listen to our milieu. But I would argue that they are the red herring. Initially, the next red herring. The first one was Bilderberg's. Now we've got World Economic Forum, and I'm not saying that they don't affect the way the world is run, but I think that behind the World Economic Forum, there are probably meetings we know nothing about.
Yes.
And behind those meetings are spirits.
Yes.
That are directing mankind.
It would be difficult for people who can't go out for a coffee without attracting media attention to come up with a secret plan to rule the world.
Yeah. Well, it's not so secret because their plans are right here in their PDF, Global Risks, for various years. And there's a 2023 PDF that you can download and take a look at.
Yeah. Put this on in a link in the show notes so that you can download this PDF yourself and check it out and find out what the World Economic Forum is telling us to be afraid of for the next 2 years and 10 years. And really, that's what this is all about. It's about spreading fear, sowing doubt and uncertainty about the future so that we will clamor for a global savior. That's what the Great Reset is all about. Fundamentally restructuring human civilization along the lines that they see as necessary to bring about heaven on earth. That's what the Great Reset really is all about.
We all want to picture the individuals who meet at these, like at Davos and at, Bilderberg, whatever you want to call them, these big meetings of oligarchs who are influencing the world. We want to paint them in James Bond villain. They're sitting there stroking a cat, that kind of thing. But no, let me finish this. But the fact is, in their minds, they truly believe, many of them, they are true believers in if we could just get to a position where the people are happier because we're now providing for them in a utopian setting.
Right.
that is the vision. It's transhumanist. It is, well, as I said before, utopian, but it is mistaken. It is so mistaken. It is the lie that began in Eden. Mm-hmm. You can be better. You can be happier. You can be just like we are. You shall be as the Elohim. Mm-hmm. The elder brother, the Elohim in the garden, the Nakash, who was created before Adam and Eve were created, presumably had powers that were kind of cool. And maybe Adam and Eve thought, that would be good. We'd be like that. You know, maybe God planned for us to be like that all along. After all, that's how the others are. So why are we not like that? Mm-hmm. So maybe the movers and shakers of this world believe they are returning us to Eden.
Mm-hmm. That's the goal.
That's the goal, and it's a lie.
Yeah, it is. As we mentioned at the beginning, this will be a subject that we're going to discuss on the Jim Baker Show when we're down there in Blue Eye on February 2nd.
And he asked us to come down and discuss it.
Yeah, and consider that quite an honor. It's like, who do we know who's an expert in transhumanism? Because that's a key part of the World Economic Forum's Great Reset.
And we've written about it.
We've written about it. We've been giving presentations on this going on 10 years now.
Years.
So they invited us, which we're happy to.
We're so glad to go down there every time.
And last night I recorded a presentation because as part of our appearance there, we've provided them with about 4.5 hours of video content presentations that we've given on this subject. And I had one that I've done previously on the Great Reset specifically, but I had never recorded it to video. So I did that last night. And that will be part of the special offer that they'll make available during that, when that show is broadcast, probably the second week of February. But it really is about returning us to a state. But I argue in my presentation that it's really about bringing us back to the world's first attempt at building an empire.
Yes.
And so I subtitled my presentation, The Great Reset, the subtitle, The Globalist Plan to Build Back Babel.
But you know, that's so true. It is so true. And the whole point of Babel was to return mankind to a pre-flood condition.
Right.
Because there was a belief somehow that was the golden age. Mm-hmm. And we have to get back to that. And the only way we can do that is to bring back the elder brothers who advised us.
The old gods.
The old gods.
Christopher Knowles.
Yes.
We've talked with, exchanged emails with.
And he admits he's not a believer. He was raised to be one, but he's sort of agnostic at this point.
Yeah, although he's moving more back into a Christian direction.
Been praying for him for years, so that would be lovely.
He's been a guest on A View from the Bunker a couple of times. We talked years ago about the connection between St. Patrick and Osiris and the Green Man of Celtic mythology. Mm-hmm. But we did a program last year on what he's been doing since then. He's been talking a lot and giving presentations at his site on the cult of the Watchers. Mm-hmm. He believes that a lot of the symbolism embedded in entertainment and in political events over the past, well, I don't know, in recent years, let's put it that way, are about the worship of these pre-flood entities called Watchers. We need to distinguish that there are good watchers and bad watchers.
It's a class of angel.
It's a class of angel.
Of Elohim, actually.
In Daniel chapter 4, the watchers are the ones who decree the punishment of Nebuchadnezzar. So presumably they're still faithful to God, but there were some who rebelled, the sons of God mentioned in Genesis chapter 6. And Chris believes that elites, political, business, religious elites around the world are part of this very secretive cult of watchers. And I think he's onto something there. I know when they had the Commonwealth Games in the UK recently in Birmingham, and they had that giant mechanical bull that came out, and everybody's saying, oh, it's Baal, it's Baal, it's Baal worship. Baal was sometimes connected with bull imagery, but more than that, the older gods, Kronos, whose name derives from the Hebrew or the Semitic word for horns, Bol-El, his Canaanite identity. Mm-hmm. I think this was more of a nod to those old gods.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Inanna was even pictured with horns. These old entities,
sure,
they would have these horns that wrapped around their hats. Mm-hmm.
That's how the Sumerians designated the deities in their artwork. Oh, yeah, he's wearing the hat with the multiple sets of horns.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that propagate through our culture. We've talked before about the rebranding of the Titans. Lately, we've been watching a lot of the Godzilla movies and the MonsterVerse films, where the monsters, the giant creatures, are now called Titans, the original and rightful rulers of Earth. And it's essentially a rebranding. Godzilla is king of the Titans.
They emerge from volcanoes. They emerge from the sea. They emerge from, rocky areas. There are so much old symbolism in that.
Right. So the World Economic Forum, these humans who think that they're bringing back these old gods and somehow think that they're going to, elevate us to their status.
Yeah.
With their fourth industrial revolution, which is what they call transhumanism. They're really deluded.
But we need to pray for those individuals. It's really easy to sit and poke fun at it when, in fact, it is tragic. These individuals are going to lead much of the world into a state that brings about Armageddon. But more than that, these individuals need Jesus. He died for them too. We don't want to think about that. We don't like him, so, Jesus didn't.
He deserves to be smote. Smited.
Well, the day will come when the Lord himself will judge them. And when the day comes that he judges humans and Elohim, the fallen from the heaven, if you want to call it that, that day we see it in the Old Testament and the New, that he is going to do a lot of smiting. And the second half of the tribulation period is full of those. You and I have just been talking about it on Unraveling Revelation, those bold judgments, pouring out God's wrath the way that humans were forced to pour out libations to the fallen realm, to the ancestors they believed, for millennia. Well, this is being turned around. So yes, the World Economic Forum, those individuals need prayer too. They see the Great Reset being driven by the arts, by innovative thinkers, and we're seeing a lot of this from the left right now. But it also is driven by transhumanism, by technology, by cyber creations, by artificial intelligence. One of the stories I read a couple of days ago, if you don't follow me on Twitter, then you're missing out on a whole lot of news stories. I do almost nothing but just whatever news I think is important for 5 and 10 and P.I.D. radio, I put there. One of the stories had to do with quantum computing and the fact that quantum computers are getting more and more powerful and more useful. Right now, they require, for the most part, a lot of, we'll call it refrigeration, low temperatures in order to maintain activity. But there are some innovations that will allow these quantum computers to operate at room temperature. At 24 degrees Celsius.
That's a big deal.
That's a big deal. When that day comes and they become, they become more powerful and less expensive, these quantum computers have the capacity to say maybe.
Yeah.
It's not just ones and zeros. There's an inner operation where they can go, not sure, maybe about that. In other words, their thinking is closer to that of a human.
Right.
And the belief is that these computers not only will become sentient, but that they will have the capacity to tear down all of our encryption, banking encryption, private encryption, email encryption. Everything will be exposed. Therefore, the economic system and all of our communications, military included, will crash.
Taking us back to Babel. Yeah.
Yes,
all of our communications will have to be
order out of chaos.
Yeah. We'll have to go back to inscribing things in clay.
What? Analog?
That would be an interesting day. It sounds apocalyptic.
It does, but that was in a mainstream news article.
Yeah. One of the leaders of the transhumanist movement, one of the founders of the Singularity Summit, Eliezer Yudkowsky, who's brilliant. He's an autodidact. Never went to high school, never went to college.
Yeah.
But in 1980, he founded the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, MIRI, yeah. And they are researching ways artificial intelligence might pose an existential threat to humanity. He's the guy who was so afraid of, Rocco's basilisk.
Oh, yes.
The idea that some future artificial intelligence would go back into the past somehow and manipulate us humans into making sure that it was created. Yeah, I mean, it would go back. The fact that it's existing.
Terminator.
It is.
The follow-up movies to the Terminator had, them going, well, even the Terminator himself. He went into the past to destroy John Carter or John...
Yeah.
Whatever his name was.
Sarah, what was it? Connor. John Connor.
Yes, yeah. John Connor.
And
his initials happen to be the same initials.
JC. So this is something that some very intelligent people are worried about, losing sleep over. And it, for the rest of us, we can kind of laugh at this and say, okay, you're really getting all angsty about this, about some supercomputer in the future coming back and messing with us in the present day. And yes, they are, Yudkowsky. And he's not a fringe guy. There are people who give his institute, MIRI, a lot of money, millions of dollars to do this kind of research. And he's partnered with the likes of Raymond Kurzweil, Peter Diamandis, again, brilliant men who are very successful in their respected academic fields. Kurzweil, a brilliant inventor, considered one of the most brilliant men of the last 100 years or so. But Yudkowsky was banning any mention of this concept of, Rocco's basilisk from the forums at MIRI because he was afraid that if you talk about it, you will attract the attention of this supercomputer who will then mess with your life.
You would be summoning it.
Yeah.
Summoning the demon.
Mm-hmm. And suddenly, for no apparent reason, your grant money dries up, your career hits a dead end, you walk in front of a bus or whatever, and it's all because of some future super intelligence that we've created. It's kind of like the plot for that movie, The Peripheral, the series on Amazon Prime, The Peripheral, where a future that's on a post-apocalyptic side of some massive event that they call the jackpot. Everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong at once. Climate disasters, pandemic, wars, whatever. And human civilization is reduced to a few survivors who've got access to some pretty cool technology. But they go back into the past and start tinkering with the past. But when you tinker with the past, you create an offshoot of the timeline that you're on. Because clearly in the timeline you're on, the past wasn't tinkered with. So again, it's a philosophical argument that can drive you nuts if you start thinking about it. I don't believe this will ever actually happen.
I don't think so.
We were created by God to experience time in a linear fashion. It's great for science fiction storytelling, but it's, these folks who are spending time and money researching this and worrying about it and wanting to become godlike so that we could somehow survive it. Boy, if they would just accept Jesus Christ, you lose a lot of those worries.
Oh, I know. Science fiction is, I'm fascinated by it because much in science fiction historically has come true. There was a TV film years ago that starred Cheryl Ladd and I think maybe Christopherson or somebody was in it. And it was called Millennium. And it was about a humanity that was going extinct and in the future. So from the future, they had the capacity to go back into the past and they would go onto airplanes and when they would take the people back to help repopulate their world. Almost like they were rapturing them.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, science fiction, but it's also pre-programming. There is a lot of in fiction, and it's why I write fiction, because I write it to sort of counteract what's going on in most fiction, and that is a nihilistic, anti-God worldview, or just no God at all, but Satan exists.
Yeah, I've talked with Jed Burton about that on A View from the Bunker during our Halloween episodes especially. Why is it that so many Halloween-type films or horror films postulate the existence of supernatural evil, but it's always overcome by humans without any help from God?
Yeah.
That's exactly the opposite of the way it works.
Oh, I know. And yet, that is essentially saying mankind has the capacity within him to overcome a God. Therefore, he must be
a God. Yeah. No,
we're not.
It's not. Well, that's not how any of this works.
No, it's not. Yeah. We were created to populate Earth. We're made from Earth. We're created to. We were told to take dominion here, and Adam handed it over to the tempter in the garden.
And that was part of the plan. Let's create first of all let's take away their birthright.
Yes.
And then the incursion in Genesis chapter 6. Let's create a hybrid army to take dominion away from these humans.
Exactly. That was the fallen realm plan. The Lord foresaw it. He knew from everlasting that this would happen. So praise his holy name for having a plan to counteract all of this.
Yeah.
And why create anything if he knew all this was going to happen? Because he has such a capacity for love, I think. And he foresaw the ones who would love him. And to him, it was worth it to allow those beings to exist.
And he does not abrogate our free will. He gives us the opportunity to choose, and he will abide by those choices.
That includes the Elohim, those who were created before mankind. They also have free will.
And many of them, just like us, have chosen badly. Which is where we get the World Economic Forum and this idea that somehow we can become just like them.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about the logic behind the Great Reset and this idea that we should incorporate transhumanism as part of this Great Reset. I think we can all agree there are a lot of things in this world that are messed up. That's the whole reason behind needing a Great Reset. We humans have really messed up this planet. So let's make ourselves superpowered, and that'll make it better. Wait, no, it'll mean we just be able to do bad things with more power.
Yeah.
More intensely.
I know. It's such a lie. And there are those who are falling for it hook, line, and sinker because it's been taught to us, not just through the news media, but also through television and novels and also through film. I mean, it is comic books, for goodness sake. Graphic novels, they imply that we have within us the germ of godhood that we need to nurture. No, what we have within us is the potential to be part of that divine assembly for which we were originally created.
Right. But not in our current physical form.
No.
We will be resurrected into incorruptible bodies.
No. Praise the Lord. We were created as his imagers on this earth. We're supposed to be the rulers of this earth. Gosh, where's all that?
That was one of the lines in that wonderful episode from the television series Millennium, which ran between 1997 and 99. Ironically, they ended it before the Millennium got here.
Yes, I know. That made no sense.
There was an episode in the second season called Somehow Satan Got Behind Me.
Oh, I love that episode.
Which features 4 demons sitting in a donut shop talking about their recent escapades in tempting humans to do bad things. And all of them encounter the main character of the series, Frank Black, played by Lance Henriksen. But one of them makes the observation that humans, God created them with free will, and then they spend their entire lives blaming their problems on everything but their own choices. And that's very true. There's a lot of truth in that episode.
We all do that.
Yeah. Not my fault. Prince Harry's making a whole career out of this.
That young man, he's so tragic.
He really is.
He's almost like a Shakespearean character.
Yeah. you want somebody to just kind of grab him by the collar and slap him around a little bit. And I say that half jokingly because it's way too late. I mean, at his age 39 or whatever he is now.
He's 38, but 38. He could still change. There is no sunset on the age at which you can change if the Lord becomes part of your life.
Well, that's true. I know I'm a lot different now than I was when I was 38. And you can testify to that. But and just again, not wanting to go down the Harry and Meghan thing, but we as a species are really good about looking for reasons to blame our troubles. And oftentimes our troubles are the result of our own poor choices. But God tells us right up front, look, here are the choices before you. As far back as the Old Testament, if you choose these things, you'll be blessed, you'll be secure, you'll be happy in the land, you'll prosper. Do these other things, and you'll be attacked, your enemies will conquer you, you'll be subjugated, you'll be driven out of the land, et cetera, et cetera. Very clear, and yet often, but rather again and again, the Israelites chose badly, and we do the same thing.
Well, it used to be that in the days of Rome, in the days of Mesopotamia, you can name Egypt, you can name any ancient empire, and you will find that the way things worked, yes, humans made decisions, but they made decisions at least publicly, acknowledging a God who was favoring them, or a God who had cursed their enemy, or they would go into the temple of a certain god and they would ask Mars, or they would ask the Fates, or they would ask Pluto or someone to witness a curse tablet that they were inscribing. Well, we've even, archaeologists have discovered curse tablets, and there was one discovered at Mount Ebal. But the idea that you could summon a god to a conversation, and that this God would then obey you, or that a God would bless you so much that you would rise to the top of the military, or you would rise to the top of the Senate and eventually become consul and take over as the new dictator, whatever. That's still going on today. It's just not as public as it used to be. Right.
The fallen realm has found it very helpful to convince most of us in the Western world that they don't really exist.
Yes.
But
Baudelaire.
Yes. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled. But there are those who are in positions of authority who very quietly behind the scenes do believe and are organizing their activity to try to please these old entities. I think it was very telling, and I credit you for finding all of this. You wrote this for Tom's book, Zeitgeist 2025, I believe,
yes.
on what happened at the Capitol on January 6th of 2021, and how many of our political class, I mean, Senators Schumer and Durbin and Klobuchar and Representatives Pelosi and Liz Cheney, calling the United States Capitol our temple of democracy and using terms reserved for the violation of sacred space. It was desecrated. Well, you can't desecrate something that's not a holy space. And I'm sorry, the United States Capitol is just a big office building.
But it has been designed as a holy space. And Tom Horn he's been chasing this truth for years.
And when I first came out with the book, Apollyon Rising 2012, I thought, well, okay, that's...
When he came out with the book.
When Tom came out with the book, I thought, well, okay, that's an interesting theory, but when I started digging into it for the second coming of Saturn, and especially after you pointed out the fact that January 6th is Epiphany or Theophany in the Eastern Church.
When the God becomes manifest.
Yeah. When traditionally the three wise men recognized and acknowledged the divinity of the Christ child, that was the day that the so-called temple of democracy was desecrated. Oh, okay. So there is more going on here than that. And then when you start digging into the art and architecture of the United States Capitol, the designers, the architect, the artists who decorated the inside of the Capitol may not have been aware of what all they were putting in there, but boy, there's a lot in there.
There's so much in there, and it goes back to Greco-Roman. And as you wrote in The Second Coming of Saturn, and something that I discovered for Tom's book was that it's more than just that we call it the Temple of Democracy. It's been called that. I don't call it that. But that it is called the Capitol, T-O-L. That goes back to Rome.
Yeah, the name of the Temple of Jupiter. Jupiter Optimus Maximus and his temple on the Capitoline Hill, which it's why it got the name, the Capitol. But the Capitoline Hill was named because they found a human skull or a human head, well-preserved human head, when they were excavating for the foundations back around late 6th century BC. So sometime around 520 BC, the final king of Rome, Tarquinius Superbus, or Tarquin the Proud, Tarquin the Jerk. There's a reason he was the last king of Rome before the Roman Empire. The Romans were like, this guy's really mean. Let's have a republic instead. Anyway, the Etruscans, and Tarquin was an Etruscan. They were like northern neighbors of the Latins, the Romans. They believed that you communicated with the dead through severed human heads or skulls.
That's an old idea.
It is. It goes back to, probably goes back to ancient Jericho, the idea, and the Natufian culture, which seemed to venerate human skulls. They would take skulls.
Amorites?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm talking like 9,000 BC.
That's really old.
Yeah, pre-pottery Neolithic A or something.
Pre-flood.
Very possibly, yes. I would say yes. They would take skulls, they would plaster them and decorate them and then keep them on display in the home. And they found those at Çatalhöyük in Turkey, as well as at other Neolithic sites. But the Jericho skulls, if you want to look that up, just do a search online for Jericho skulls, and you'll see what we're talking about. But in the 6th century BC, when they were excavating for the Temple of Jupiter, they found a human head, well preserved. Hey, that's a great omen. Rome is going to be great. And that's why it's the Capitoline Hill, the Temple of Jupiter, the Capitol or Capitolium, and why the United States Capitol is called the Capitol.
Yes, that skull is in a place that belongs now to Saturn. And during the age of Rome, it was Saturn's domain because he had been
Saturnus.
Yes. Originally, Saturn had been up on top of the Capitol, and it was his temple that was replaced by Zeus's temple.
Yeah.
Zeus, who threw his father down to Tartarus. What a lie.
Saturn's temple got pushed off the top of the hill down to the base of the hill, but it was still where Rome kept its gold.
Yes, very much. It also mirrors what happened in Jerusalem, that Solomon stupidly put a temple to Molech on the Mount of Olives.
Right.
And it may, who knows, it may have been right over the place of Goliath's skull.
Golgotha.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, lots of connections there, and I go into all of that in the book. So if you're interested in looking at the research and following the references, those are all in The Second Coming of Saturn.
You know, it's really interesting, too, staying with this idea of ancient practices and how they relate to bones and human sacrifice. There was a belief, and it continued right up until the age of the Romans and maybe even after the Roman Empire fell. This idea that if you wanted a building or a bridge to stand, you had to put a human underneath of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that is well known from Amorite sites as well. Even among the Hyksos who were the rulers of the Nile Delta in the time of the Israelite sojourn in Egypt.
It brings an entirely different... In fact, there was one bridge, and I'll get to what I was starting to say there in a second. There was and I can't remember what bridge it was. It was in relatively modern times, maybe a few hundred years ago. The bridge was being built and it kept falling down. And so finally one of the stonemasons said, we have to sacrifice. Otherwise, because there's this ancient belief that only by appeasing the ancestors or sending some human down to Hades, to the other world, would stabilize the structure. It's a horrendous idea, but it gives a new dimension to Christ's words when he says he is the cornerstone, because oftentimes that sacrifice would take place under the cornerstone or under the threshold.
The stone that the builders rejected.
Yes. Yeah. He's not the cornerstone of this new world empire. It's Kronos. It is the old gods who are the cornerstone. They're blessing and stabilizing this new world empire, not Christ.
Boy, build back Babel. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got some thoughts on that. We'll bring that back because, yes, we are turning back the clock more than 5,000 years, and we'll continue our discussion when P.I.D. Radio continues. Welcome back to P.I.D. Radio. I'm Derek Gilbert.
That would make me Sharon Gilbert, and I'm really glad that you have chosen to put us in your ears this morning. We're just so happy to be back with P.I.D. Radio. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Mine too. We have been loading a lot of the archives back into our app.
Yeah.
So if you get the app, you can go back and listen to what we were talking about in 2005, 6, 7. I'm up to 2009, just uploaded July of 2009. And this is when we were doing PID Radio daily.
Mm-hmm.
So
a lot of old shows.
I have forgotten a lot of what we talked about back in the day. But
some of it's probably just useless blather, but
some of it, but a lot of really good content, a lot of interviews from back then. Peter Levenda talking about Nazis and the occult, the fact that the Nazi Party was an occult, working. Our first interviews with people like Mike Heiser, Tom Horn, L.A. Marzulli are now available on the app. And
Stan Deo.
So Stan Deo, yeah,
David Flynn.
Yeah, David Flynn, David Duncan, the New World Order scam, one of the most important interviews that we've ever done. I just reposted that. So that's in the classic PID tab on our app. So check that out.
Also, we did interviews, or you did interviews on Old View from the Bunker, I think, with Daniel Marvin.
Yes. Dan Marvin, Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Marvin, who wrote a book called Expendable Elite about his time in Vietnam and how they were tasked with going across the border into Cambodia, which was not supposed to happen during Vietnam.
Yeah, Nixon said, we're not there.
Well, this would have been during the time of Johnson.
That's true. That is true. In fact, one of the things that was he Lieutenant Colonel?
Lieutenant Colonel.
Told us, and it wasn't just us. He was in some documentaries making this statement that he had been approached to eliminate, we'll just put it that way, an individual who was a threat to the government.
A high-ranking
and
naval officer.
Right. And a friend of his took on the job.
Yes. And not long after that came word that the man who'd been responsible for John F. Kennedy's autopsy
in Washington,
man named Pitzer, committed suicide by falling out of a window.
Well, look, there are generals and oligarchs in Russia who are falling out of windows left and right.
Right.
So much so that you and I were watching Sky News, and one of the commentators talked about Russia and said how they were changing up the administration and especially the organization of the generals. And he said, well, that's assuming he doesn't fall out of a window.
Yeah, it's can be a dangerous profession, especially in some parts of the world. But even here in the United States, it was William Bruce Pitzer, who died in 1966, October of 1966. And that's how we came to learn about Dan Marvin.
Documentary.
Yeah, the men who killed Kennedy.
Yes.
And he began to weep as he was on camera because his grandson had gone into the military and wanted to become a Green Beret, just like his grandfather. And Dan said, I just want them to know that this is not what they think it is. These young men who are volunteering today, young men and women volunteering for good reasons, and they're being used to carry out
atrocities.
Really dark, atrocities, dark agendas for men in suits in the halls of power in Washington, D.C., London, Paris, other world capitals. So, those are really powerful interviews. Dan Marvin became a believer in Jesus Christ. Had led one of his daughters to the Lord during a long road trip that they took together. And just a remarkable man. We really consider it an honor that we were able to call him a friend. He has gone home to be with the Lord since then. But just seeing him in that documentary, and that this guy, the man that he had been with, and this I believe is at Fort Bragg, either Fort Bragg or Fort Benning, and I forget which, but either way, the man who these men in suits approached after Dan turned them down, saying, look, I didn't sign up and become a Green Beret to kill American citizens. The other fellow who had been approached disappeared from the duty rosters.
Yeah.
at the base where Dan was stationed at the time.
That would have happened with Dan.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, those are available on the app, and you can also take advantage of streaming video. Many of the video teachings that we do have available are now available to stream instantly as well. Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna create a custom link for it, gilberthouse.org/video.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, rather than having to remember gilberthouse.uscreen.io/.
Oh yeah, no, it's easier just /video.
Yeah.
Another one of the interviews we did years ago, and I forgive me, I cannot recall the book nor the author. It had to do with questions around Lincoln's assassination and how there were newspapers, small newspapers, and telegraph operators in, I think, Minnesota, who seemed to have that information before it happened. Or before it was announced.
Oh, wow.
It was similar to Australian papers running the JFK assassination before it happened here. Because Australia is like 14 hours ahead of us or something.
Right. Yeah, they were aware of it before the news had hit the press, before the news could have gotten as far west. Remember that in 1865, Minnesota and Iowa were essentially the western frontier.
Well, there were telegraphs.
Yeah.
But still, to get it before... Yeah, there are just so many questions throughout history, and I think it reveals, to me at least, that it is not simply human beings making decisions, that there are entities driving mankind towards a return. We're being told it's a return to a golden age, and if you have a world leader who will not go along with that idea, then if he or she cannot be persuaded or sidelined in some other way, there are times when they're murdered.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a very old way of eliminating problems. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm doing a quick search on our websites, PIDradio.com, VFTB.net, to see if I can find the interview, and I am not seeing it. So I'll have to go back and find... in the archives where it was.
I remember reading the book, and it was a quick read. It was a big book, but I remember reading it very quickly because it was so fascinating. We interviewed a lot of people back in the day. We've been at this a long time.
We have.
It'll be 18 years come March, early March. By the way, we started P.I.D. Radio, I think, 1 week before Dr. Future's podcast began.
Yeah. And... Dr. Future, Dr. Michael Bennett, who was a recent guest on A View from the Bunker this past year. He's got a new book out. It kind of asks some uncomfortable questions about the level of involvement we Christians have with politics and how we go about it. Difficult, uncomfortable because a lot of us, self-included here, tend to forget about the line. We're not going to share the gospel by winning Congress and winning the White House. But it's very hard to separate our natural reaction to the way the political news is presented to us here in the U.S.
We're
as
being
though it's
driven by the media.
Yeah, it's like a sporting event. And that's by design. Keep us tuned in, clicked, and also forgetting what our true priorities are, which is to make disciples of all nations. But anyway, he began podcasting back in 2005, a week after us. He's back on Radio Free Nashville, Thursdays at 5 p.m. local time. He gets a 1-hour slot. So if you're in the Nashville area, Radio Free Nashville, I believe, is WRFN. That would make sense, wouldn't it?
It would.
And you can listen to, I don't know if he's calling his program Dr. Future again or Future Quake, but you can check that out.
He called it Future Quake?
That was his program. Yeah, back in the day. The podcast was called Future Quake.
Oh, that's right. Boy.
Mike and his sidekick, Tom Bionic.
Yes.
Mike Tater. Yeah. So that is a new development. So we're happy to see Dr. Future, Dr. Michael Bennett back on the radio.
So very
thought-provoking, deep thinker, and we consider him a good friend. He had that Future Mobile.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
With a wonderful artistic representation of a bunch of us in this sort of alternative Christian milieu on the side, depicted as the heavenly host following Jesus into battle.
He chose a picture of me with my Farrah Fawcett hair so that it looked like it was blowing in the wind. Oh my gosh. And he had his dog on there.
Yes, Astro.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So
if we had Sam at the time.
Yeah, Sam would have been in there. Yeah. Instead, we that was when we still had Belle, Gretel, and Murphy. We do have pictures of them with tinfoil hats.
Oh my gosh. They were great dogs. I'm sure that they're with Sam right now.
Coming back to the World Economic Forum and this whole idea of the veneration of the Watchers and the idea that this is a really old idea. When we were at the British Museum in 2019 and we saw the small, maybe 4-inch, 5-inch figurines of the Apkallu, which were the Mesopotamian Watchers. That was their term for these divine creatures or semi-divine creatures who had come forth from the Abzu, the abyss, to bring the gifts of civilization to humanity. Those little figures were used as guardians. They were buried at the beneath the threshold of the door.
Yes.
To guard the liminal, but they were also put in foundation deposits to protect the building.
Yes, and sometimes they were used as tent stakes.
Yes.
Which was a way, I think, of connecting the tabernacle or your personal tent with the underworld.
So again, this idea that we are going to draw on the power of these old gods to become as gods ourselves, summoning them for their assistance in warding off evil, warding off disease or sickness or old age or whatever. We've modernized it. We've scientized it in a way.
Scientized for your protection.
But it's really not a whole lot different from what the ancient Mesopotamians were doing.
No. Well, what goes around comes around. It's that old idea of the circle, the Ouroboros. We are returning once again to that, what's being described as utopia, the golden age, whatever you want to call it. It's all a lie. When I took mythology at Indiana University many, many years ago as part of strangely enough, my history minor, one of the many themes that was taught over and over again was this wonderful Scotsman who taught the class. And he got into the idea of the various metals. And it's just like the statue that we see in the Old Testament. That you begin with the golden age and then you go down to silver and bronze and eventually you end up with iron. And we are presently living in the Iron Age, according to that mythological cycle. And that will eventually collapse into chaos. They will not mingle together. They cannot mingle together. Will not hold. And then suddenly we'll be back to the Golden Age. The only way to get that is for something terrible to happen here on Earth. The Great Reset. And of course, in my chapter, and I think you may address it as well in the Second Coming of Saturn, the idea that word reset, when it was initially branded with a video from the World Economic Forum, it was RE:SET. Separating those two syllables. They're god names in Egypt.
Yeah.
Re and Set.
Yeah. Most of us have heard of Ra, but Re was the way it was pronounced in ancient Egypt.
Yes, he was a very high creator god.
Yeah, the sun god. And Set was originally the protector of the solar boat when it went over the horizon at night. He protected it against the attacks of Apophis, who was the chaos monster. But later, Set became a villain in Egyptian religion, the one who had killed his brother Osiris, cut him up into 14 pieces. And he became equated with the Greek chaos monster Typhon.
Think about it. This is Set who chopped his brother up, destroyed him. This is very similar to the idea of order and chaos.
Yeah.
So essentially, that's a shorthand. Re and Set, reset. It's a shorthand way of saying
and chaos.
Yes, exactly. It's the Ouroboros once again.
Well, and that brings us back to the World Economic Forum in the upcoming meeting this week.
Back.
Yes.
Circling back.
Yes. They in their PDF document, which they've
And there's
posted
something.
to their web. Yeah, the Global Risks Report.
They've been coming out with those every year for a long time. I think the first one I read was 2014.
Yeah. And the World Economic Forum has been around since 1971. That's when Klaus Schwab formed it. And the image that I used in the presentation that I recorded for
What year did you say?
1971.
Oh, for some reason, I heard you say it, and then my brain translated that into 1921. And that may be because I've been reading so many news reports and articles from that time for the Red Wing Saga research. 1971.
At some point,
it was a good year.
At some point, when we get past all of the other things that we just have a couple of things on our whiteboard list of things, but would love to do a deep dive into the World Economic Forum. How is it that this engineer and economist, Klaus Schwab, has managed to put together this influential organization? I don't know.
Well,
I would assume
ask,
that he's getting some support from the spirit realm somehow.
How did Bankman-Fried put together the FTX thing out of nowhere?
Yeah. Well, help from outside.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway.
So Schwab is the front man.
Mm-hmm. Schwab, who's in the image I was using, shows that picture of him wearing that really funky, weird-looking, like space-type suit with the weird... I thought that was photoshopped, but it's not. He actually did wear that suit once.
It's like a James Bond villain.
He does. He's from Central Casting. He should be stroking a white cat, Anyway.
It's like the villains in the kaiju movies from back in the day, the older ones. They all had these space suits and sunglasses.
Yes, the Exilians or the whatever, the Kirillocks or whatever they called. But he's managed to build up this organization that brings together people. The crew attending from the United States this week includes the director of the FBI and let's see, who's the Secretary of Labor, Director of National Intelligence, U.S. Trade Representative, Chris Wray, Director of the FBI, U.S. Agency for International Development Administrator, USAID, which is a CIA front, Samantha Power, John Kerry, because, climate.
He always goes, yeah.
And then a bunch of our elected officials, Senator Chris Coons of Delaware, Senator Maria Cantwell of Washington, Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Senator James Risch, Republican from Idaho, Senator Kirsten Sinema, we're not sure if she's Democrat or Republican these days, Senator Representatives Don Bayer, Joaquin Castro, Darrell Issa, Gregory Meeks, Seth Moulton, Maria Salazar, Mikey Sherrill, and Juan Vargas. So we've got 13 from the United States attending. But as you say, this is like, the stalking horse, the red herring. Look over here. Don't look behind the scenes.
Exactly. There has to be something else going on in the background. Yeah. And also it could be that if that news becomes, if anytime you see a news report that dominates the headlines for days, try to find out what else is going on.
Right. Well, in this Global Risks Report, they outline the 10 most dangerous threats in the near term and in the longer term, 2 years out and 10 years out. And the top 10 going from 10 to 1, 2 years out. Number 10, large-scale involuntary migration, which of course is caused by climate change. Number 9, natural resource crises.
We say that tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah. That's how they're going to justify it. And the whole point of putting out these lists, by the way, is just to tell us how they're going to try to scare us into accepting global government.
One story this morning, that Tonga, the volcano that went off last year, has driven the climate change faster. It has accelerated it so that now 1.5 degrees Celsius increase could happen any minute.
Oh, noes. So number 8, widespread cybercrime and cyber insecurity.
By the way, we say "oh noes" here all the time, and I have no idea where it started.
It's some internet thing. Somebody mistyped it NOES, and so it's like it's more than one "oh no." It's multiple like, "oh noes."
It's like Woot. Somehow "oh noes" has become the thing. Yeah.
Let's see. 6, large scale environmental, or 7, failure of climate change adaptation. Large scale, and number 6, large scale.
So those of us who don't believe it, we're driving the change even faster.
Yeah. And of course, that's, climate change. Large scale environmental damage incidents. That's number 6 again. Climate change.
Gas stoves.
Yeah. Well, gas stoves.
I saw my friend Marty on Facebook, who I've known him for so many years, decades. He had, what was he called it? not hidden. What's the word when you have concealed carry? Concealed carry gas stove. And it was this little bitty gas stove in somebody's hand. I thought that is hilarious.
If you're hearing this and you're not getting what we're talking about, news came out this past week that the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission was going to pass a regulation or just impose a regulation that would ban gas stoves because of some peer-reviewed,
theory.
and we'll put that in air quotes, some peer-reviewed research that showed that 12.7% of childhood asthma cases here in the United States were caused by gas stoves.
Okay, first of all, the so-called study had no merit to it. It would not have passed peer review.
It was a meta-analysis.
And it was also, yes, exactly. I love that meta-analysis, which essentially means we just sort of made up numbers.
Looked at other studies and tried to calculate,
Yeah, well, that supposedly was submitted to a think tank. Mm-hmm. And the think tank is the one that made the recommendation.
And the think tank is funded by the World Economic Forum.
Yes.
Yeah. So, that was and there was enough pushback on this from members of Congress. It's like, are you serious? And people mocking the idea that they backed down on that. But they'll probably try to push it through again. The irony of all this, the stupidity of all this is that, all right, first of all, well, no, I could
don't even get to it. It's just another example of trying to drive the economy and move the herd.
But 60% of the electricity in the United States comes from natural gas and coal. Yeah. So, the fumes from the natural gas stove are bad. So we're going to switch you over to a stove that's powered by coal or natural gas. That's better. Like, okay.
No.
Yeah. Anyway, I could go through these lists, but again, 2 years out, 10 years out, when you look at the color coding,
they have graphs.
They have charts.
Graphs.
Yes, and look at the colors.
Charts.
Yeah,
Venn diagrams.
Most of the colors 10 years out are related to environmental crises.
Mm-hmm. Of course, that's how it's being driven.
Yeah, and even the large-scale involuntary migration is.
The two prongs of their Great Reset are driven by climate change and pandemics.
Right. Fear and more fear.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would argue that involuntary immigration often arises from either plague, famine, or war. Mm-hmm. They're being driven out by horses.
Yes.
From the book of Revelation.
Good point. Yeah. But it is being encouraged tacitly by government leaders in the Northern Hemisphere who are saying, our borders are secure. Like Joe Biden would sort of drive by the border this past week on his way to the Three Amigos summit in Mexico City. He didn't really go to the border. Did they sing the song,
My Little Buttercup?
They should have.
I'd have been so happy. We'd have all watched.
Would have been a lot more entertaining. And look, he didn't really go to the border. He walked past the wall, but the wall's not on the border. He didn't see any migrants. The city of El Paso cleaned up the streets, even though the governor, or the mayor, who's a Democrat, had declared a state of emergency. But they cleaned up the streets before the president got there.
And Mexico thanked him for not building the wall.
Yeah. And meanwhile, now we're learning more about Joe Biden and his documents in his garage with his Corvette.
Oh, no, I know. And in the meantime, Gavin Newsom has approved the idea that if you cross the border illegally into California, you can become a police officer.
Yeah, I read that this morning.
I know.
That is crazy.
Yeah, nothing like bringing in members of the cartel to, start their own fiefdom.
They cross the border. They can get a temporary work permit, and that's all you need to qualify to get a job working in law enforcement in California.
Yeah.
You just think back to ancient Rome. Were they given the Goths spears and said, okay, go ahead and police the streets? Take your swords, go police the streets of Rome? I don't think so. But, that's not to equate the Goths with Mexicans. But, I mean, the cartels and the gangs, I think that's a fair comparison.
There are some individuals crossing the border who genuinely want a better life for their families.
Yes,
there are
absolutely.
others who genuinely want to invade the United States. Mm-hmm. And form a sort of a road for their own illicit activities.
It's not asylum that they're seeking. It's economic opportunity. And some of them just want to work, but others, the cartels are doing it because they make a lot of money smuggling people across the border and even more money smuggling smuggling people across the border, but trafficking.
Yes.
That's really where the money's being made.
Well, smuggling people across the border is trafficking, but there's another type of trafficking. Even
and that's
worse.
What I'm talking about.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very profitable. It's more profitable than the drug trade.
Buying and selling human souls.
Yes. So anyway, that's really the issue as much as anything else. And if we can't get our elected officials to say, look, forget about, let's admit, okay, yeah, there are conditions in other places of the world that are really bad. And we acknowledge, our ancestors came here because they were looking for economic opportunities, but didn't smuggle them. Well, set all that aside. We understand the reasons that they want to come here, but there are people with nefarious goals in mind.
Yes. My ancestors came in here as indentured servants.
Some of mine did too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Working in the Germanic colonies, some of them.
Oh. Some of mine left because the Cossacks were problematic. Yeah. And I'm glad because it's a part of Ukraine now that was not a very safe place to be.
And you can't do that Cossack dance. You've tried it, just I can't do it either. The knees just can't. No. But yes, there are a lot of things going on in the world, and it doesn't matter where you live in the world. You are still someone that the Lord loves. He died for you. And today is the day. If you have never accepted Jesus Christ as your personal Savior, now is the time to do it. No one is promised tomorrow. We just learned a couple of days ago about Lisa Marie Presley, who suddenly has died. She had a cardiac arrest, went into a coma, and then in the coma had a second cardiac arrest and died. And that is tragic. She had no idea at 54 that was her final day on earth. You never know when your final breath will be taken. Yeah. Now, while you have a breath, use that breath to talk to the Lord and ask Him to be your Savior. Amen.
And it's a very simple thing. It's just accepting the historic fact of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, that He died in accordance with the Scriptures for your sins, and that in accordance with the Scriptures, He rose again on the third day.
That is so true.
Yeah, that's very simple. But
that's it.
What Paul wrote, Church at Corinth, that's the gospel by which we are being saved.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love the gospel.
This week on A View from the Bunker, Sunday evening, 7 p.m. Central Time, release an interview that we recorded in August with Dr. Stephen Collins. We had previously put that out on Sci Friday and decided to just bring that back because they're about to begin their final dig season at Tal El Hammam, which is the site of ancient Sodom.
I know, and I don't know if it's too late. It probably is too late. I think you had to have your applications in by the end of January, maybe, or maybe even now, mid-January, to go with them. But
it was last summer.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Long ago then.
But as we're recording this on Saturday the 14th, they've got a live broadcast tonight to help raise funds. They just took advantage of someone who had offered them a $50,000 match. So people who donated up to $50,000, there was another anonymous donor who would kick in another $50 to match it. So they've fulfilled that. And the reason they're pushing to raise funds is because this will be their final season in Jordan. The government of Jordan is going to take that site and then turn it into an archaeological site for tourists, which I think is wonderful because we wanted to visit that. We had hoped if they were going to be there another year or two to go and actually volunteer at the dig, but that's not going to happen now. But still would love to visit that site. If you go with us in March, however, we will show it to you from Mount Nebo. You can see it from there. But tonight at TEHEP, which is Tal El Hammam Excavation Project. That's the acronym.
You'll put the link in.
I'll put the link in the show notes. But they've got a fundraising event this evening, Saturday, January 14th, beginning at 8 p.m. Central Time, a live streaming event. And you can contribute to the work that they're going to do. They've got years and years of research ahead of them just to collate, analyze, and publish the results of the dig. But what they found already is just absolutely stunning.
There's amazing stuff that they've discovered that is still embargoed. We cannot talk about it, but that we discussed with Dr. Collins after that interview. He's an incredible man. Everyone working on that dig, they're just, thank you to all the archaeologists who are willing to go out and work in really sometimes terrible conditions and under pressure by local governments, all the things that they have to go through, and yet they're willing to do it.
Yeah. He's been very diplomatic, but it seems that the environment there in Jordan has gotten a little more convoluted in recent years.
Less friendly to Western experts, probably.
And
Yeah. But anyway, yes. Oh, and speaking of View from the Bunker, I'm going to jump in here, and if you want to, take this out, I'll let you do that. But Derek and I have been talking about the possibility of, because we only have 24 hours in our days. Strangely enough, that's a phenomenon that we've noticed here in the Ozarks.
We've not been able to
24 hours.
Yeah.
We've tried to. Josh Peck has been trying to build that machine, but it's failing every time. So I don't know what he's doing wrong. Probably doesn't have a quantum computer.
Or an interocitor.
No, yeah. MST3K reference. This Island Earth.
Yes.
That was the name of the film. Oh my gosh, how terrible. Brack, the guy with the weird head. Anyway, VFTB is something that Derek has been doing and loving for years and years, and so many wonderful interviews. And in order to have more time to write, Derek has been sort of tossing the idea around of going on hiatus with VFTB, but the classic VFTB interviews will always be there. And also the, I think you're going to continue to do the Iron and Myth. Yeah,
the series that is the Roundtable series with Dr. Judd Burton, Pastor Doug Van Doren, Brian Godawa. We've got 12 of those so far. Well, 11.
So
recording our 12th tomorrow night. But that series will continue, even if View from the Bunker goes on a bit of a hiatus just to get some writing done. And we've done this in the past where there have been periods where I would, kind of shut it down for 6 months or so.
Yeah. Well, Sci Friday's on hiatus right now, and it's because of so much time involved, and not just in recording the program and researching, but also to do the post work on it, to do the video and get that correct for television. Right.
So just keep an eye out for that. We'll make a formal announcement if and when, but at the very least, the Iron and Myth series will continue. So, but don't miss the interview with Stephen Collins. And then coming up in a couple of weeks, I'm going to piece together an interview that we did with Dr. Philip Sylvia, who is the director of scientific analysis for the dig. Just because, again, this is their final dig season. It kicks off this coming week in Jordan. Their time there will overlap by our visit to Israel by just a couple of days. I don't think we're going to have a chance to see them in Israel, but we really, really hope they have another one of their international symposia on the Bible and archaeology and the Bible, because we've been to the last two and really learned a lot at those.
We'll sign up the first day we get the email about it.
That is correct. So keep watching that. Again, get our app. With the calendar of upcoming events, we'll have all the things that we're connected to coming up in the coming years, and you'll find a link at the website.
And by the way, really quickly, if you are thinking about going to Israel with us in March, please make that decision this week, because we are quickly filling up that third bus.
Yep.
And the window of opportunity is going to close soon. Now, are we going in 2024? Yes. We'll have an announcement about those dates and who else is going with us probably in the next couple of months, but probably after we get back from Israel. But for now, if you want to go in 2023, you need to let Aaron Lipkin know as soon as possible.
Reach out to them at customer@lipkintours.com, customer@lipkintours.com.
That's it.
All right. Thank you for listening. Until next time, I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert. Bye-bye, everybody.
P.I.D. Radio is an outreach of Gilbert House Ministries, released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Follow us online, PIDradio.com, Twitter @PIDradio, or by downloading our free app, PIDradio.com/app, or gilberthouse.org/app. Join us each week for our Bible study, the Gilbert House Fellowship.